Chapter 1. Stop calling one income security. Security is not a feeling. Security is structure. One paycheck feels safe because it's familiar, not because it's strong. This chapter breaks the illusion of safety and shows why real security must be built. Chapter 2. Your job is a single point of failure. One income means one failure ends everything. When all your money comes from one source, one problem can collapse your life. This chapter explains why strong systems never depend on a single point. Chapter 3. Dependence is the real risk. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Relying on one income takes away your ability to say no or choose better. This chapter shows how dependence silently controls your decisions. Chapter 4. Income diversity is not greed, it's defense. You don't build extra income to get rich. You build it to survive. Multiple income streams protect you when life hits unexpectedly. This chapter reframes side income as defense, not ambition. Chapter 5. Time is your first asset, not money. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. Income is built by how you use your time, not by waiting for more money. This chapter shows how small, consistent time use creates leverage. Chapter 6. Comfort keeps you exposed. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. Comfort delays action and keeps you unprepared for disruption. This chapter explains why acting early is cheaper than reacting late. Chapter 7. Side income is a skill problem, not a luck problem. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. Side income comes from skills you build, not opportunities you wait for. This chapter shows why skills are the foundation of resilient income. Chapter 8. Risk shrinks when control grows. More options mean less fear. Fear comes from having no backup, not from low income. This chapter explains how control and options reduce financial risk. Chapter 9. The goal is stability first, not freedom. Stability buys time. Time builds freedom. Chasing freedom without stability creates chaos. This chapter explains why stability must come before independence. Chapter 10. Build so losing one income changes nothing. If one income disappears and you panic, the system failed. True security is when one loss doesn't shake your life. This chapter defines what real financial strength actually looks like. This isn't about working more. It's about the hidden risk of relying on a single income. This is where real financial strength begins. One income is not stability. One income is fragility pretending to be safety. If your entire life depends on one paycheck, one boss, one system, you are not secure, you are exposed. You are one decision, one slowdown, one crisis away from financial panic. This audiobook is not about getting rich fast. It's about removing risk from your life. Because wealth is not about how much you make. It's about how many ways you can lose everything. Relying on one income is the most dangerous financial strategy in the modern world. And today you're going to understand why, and exactly how to escape it. Chapter 1. Stop calling one income security. One income feels safe. Not because it is strong, but because it is familiar. That's the first lie you need to confront. You wake up. You go to work. You get paid. You repeat. And over time, repetition becomes comfort. Comfort becomes identity. And identity becomes belief. You start calling that paycheck security. But familiarity is not protection. Routine is not resilience. And repetition is not strength. That's the key. One income does not make you secure. It makes you predictable. And predictability is fragile. You have a choice. You can keep calling one income stability, or you can see it for what it is, a single thread holding up your entire life. Security is not a feeling. Security is structure. Say it again. Security is not a feeling. Security is structure. Most people never question this because questioning it feels uncomfortable. It threatens their sense of normal. And normal feels safe. But normal doesn't mean safe. Stable doesn't mean safe. You've seen this before. Layoffs that came out of nowhere. Companies that were too big to fail. Jobs that were promised to be long-term, permanent, secure. Gone. Overnight. Not because the people were lazy. Not because they were stupid. But because they trusted a structure that had only one leg. One paycheck. One employer. One source. That's not security. That's exposure. You don't need their permission to see this. You don't need an economic crisis to wake you up. You don't need to lose your job to understand the risk. You just need to be honest. A system with one point of failure is not a system. It's a gamble. And most people are gambling their entire future on one income without realizing it. That's the danger. Because when something feels familiar, the brain stops evaluating risk. It stops asking questions. It stops preparing for impact. You tell yourself stories. This company has been around forever. My boss likes me. My industry is stable. I'll figure it out if something happens. Those are not plans. Those are hopes. And hope is not a strategy. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. It's not about panic. It's about preparation. Security is not a feeling. Security is structure. Look around. People with the same job for 10 years suddenly frozen out of raises. Inflation climbing while income stays flat. Benefits shrinking. Hours cut. Bonuses removed. Still employed. Still stable. But slowly falling behind. That's another lie of one income. It doesn't just collapse suddenly. Sometimes it erodes quietly. And quiet erosion is more dangerous than sudden loss. Because it keeps you passive. Keeps you waiting. It keeps you dependent. Dependence feels safe until it isn't. You have a choice. You can keep outsourcing your security to one institution. Or you can start building it yourself. Because real security doesn't come from a paycheck. It comes from redundancy. Multiple ways to earn. Multiple skills. Multiple options. That's structure. Structure doesn't care about feelings. Structure doesn't care about promises. Structure works even when people fail. One income asks you to trust. Multiple incomes ask you to prepare. And preparation always beats trust. This is where people resist. They say, I don't want to hustle. I just want peace. I don't need more money. This isn't about hustle. This isn't about greed. This isn't about chasing more. It's about removing fragility from your life. It's not about income. It's about control. That's the key. When you rely on one income, you don't control your time. You don't control your future. You don't control your leverage. You adapt to decisions made by others. And you call that security. But control is quiet confidence. Control is knowing that if one stream stops, you don't drown. That's security. Security is not a feeling. Security is structure. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop calling comfort safety. Stop confusing consistency with protection. Stop assuming tomorrow will look like yesterday. The world doesn't reward assumptions. It punishes them. Here's what you must start doing. Start thinking in systems, not jobs. Start asking, what happens if this stops? Start building before you're forced to. You don't need to quit your job. You don't need to blow up your life. You don't need permission. You need intention. One extra skill. One additional stream. One backup plan. That's how structure begins. Most people wait until fear forces action. Disciplined people act before fear arrives. It's not about talent. It's about discipline. It's not about luck. It's about design. Security is not a feeling. Security is structure. Let this sink in. If losing one income would panic you, you are not secure. You are exposed. And exposure always comes due. This chapter is not here to scare you. It's here to wake you up. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And once you see it, you have a choice. You can ignore it and hope nothing changes. Or you can build something stronger. You mastered the illusion of safety. Now it's time to confront the real risk. Because one income isn't just limited. It's fragile. And fragility is the enemy of freedom. Now that you've stopped calling one income security, let's go deeper into the real danger. Chapter 2. Your job is a single point of failure. Every system breaks at its weakest point. Every system. Remove one critical component and the whole structure collapses. Power grids fail this way. Airplanes are designed to avoid this. Businesses engineer redundancies to survive this. Your finances are no different. When everything depends on one source, that source becomes a single point of failure. That's the key. One income means one failure ends everything. Say it again. One income means one failure ends everything. Most people never think in systems. They think in paychecks. They think in titles. They think in monthly deposits. But systems don't care about titles. They care about design. A job is not a system. It's a dependency. And dependence creates fragility. You feel it every month. The quiet tension. The background anxiety. The pressure to keep things smooth. That stress isn't weakness. It's information. It's your nervous system reacting to a fragile setup. Because when there is no margin, every problem feels like a threat. Car trouble becomes panic. Medical bills become fear. A bad week at work becomes insomnia. Not because the problems are massive, but because the structure underneath you is thin. That's what one income does. It removes margin. Margin is the space between survival and collapse. Margin is what lets you breathe. Margin is what lets you say no. When you live on one income, margin disappears. And when margin disappears, stress rises. That's not mindset. That's math. One income means one failure ends everything. People argue with this truth because it feels personal. They say, my job is stable. My company needs me. I'm essential. No one is essential to a system that is trying to survive. Companies cut costs. Companies restructure. Companies replace. Not because they're evil, but because systems protect themselves. You have a choice. You can keep believing loyalty protects you. Or you can accept reality and protect yourself. You don't need their permission to build protection. You don't need approval to reduce risk. You don't need validation to create margin. That's the key. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. It's not about distrusting your employer. It's about not betting your life on one variable. Think about this honestly. If your job disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? Not emotionally. Structurally. How long could you last? How many weeks before panic? How many months before desperation? Those answers reveal the truth. One income means one failure ends everything. This is why people tolerate things they shouldn't. Long hours. Low pay. Bad treatment. No growth. They're not weak. They're trapped. When one income is the only source, it controls behavior. You stay quiet. You stay agreeable. You stay small. Not because you lack courage, but because you lack options. Options come from redundancy. That's how power is built. In every resilient system, no single component can bring the whole thing down. That's intentional design. Your finances deserve the same respect. Yet most people design their financial life like a house with one pillar. Remove the pillar. The roof collapses. That's not unlucky. That's predictable. One income means one failure ends everything. This is where the transformation begins. You stop asking, how do I earn more at my job? And start asking, how do I reduce dependency? Income growth helps. But dependency reduction changes everything. It's not about more money. It's about more structure. That's the key. A second income doesn't need to be huge. It needs to be independent. Independent income creates margin. Margin reduces fear. Reduced fear restores clarity. This is why people with less money but more streams feel calmer than people earning more with only one source. They don't panic as easily. They don't cling as tightly. They don't negotiate from fear. Because one failure doesn't end everything. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can keep reinforcing a fragile system. Or you can start building redundancy. Here's what you stop doing. Stop telling yourself you'll figure it out later. Stop assuming stability will last. Stop ignoring stress signals as weakness. Stress is data. And the data is clear. Your system is fragile. Here's what you start doing. Start thinking like an engineer, not an employee. Ask where your single point of failure is. Design around it. One skill that pays outside your job. One stream that doesn't depend on one boss. One source that continues even if employment stops. You don't need perfection. You need progress. You don't need to quit. You need to build. That's discipline. It's not about hustle. It's about insurance. But unlike insurance, this actually pays you. One income means one failure ends everything. The moment you reduce that risk, your life changes. Not overnight, but fundamentally. You sleep differently. You think differently. You act differently. Because when survival isn't on the line, your mind works better. That's the hidden benefit. Redundancy doesn't just protect money. It protects decision-making. Fragile people make reactive choices. Stable people make strategic ones. You don't need their permission to become stable. You don't need applause to build redundancy. You don't need to explain yourself. You have a choice. And every choice either increases fragility or builds margin. One income means one failure ends everything. Let that truth stay uncomfortable. Because discomfort drives change. You've now seen the system clearly. You've identified the weakness. But knowing the flaw isn't enough. Next, we go deeper into the real cost of dependence, not just financially but psychologically. You've seen the failure point. Now let's talk about what dependence does to your leverage. Chapter 3. Dependence is the real risk. Dependence doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It says, just stay quiet. It says, don't rock the boat. It says, be grateful you have this. And slowly, without you noticing, your choices shrink. That's the key. The more dependent you are on one source, the less control you have over your time, your decisions, and your future. Not because someone is evil, but because leverage has shifted away from you. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Say it again. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. When your survival depends on one paycheck, you don't negotiate. You comply. You don't speak up. You stay silent. You don't ask for better terms. You accept worse ones. Not because you lack confidence, but because you lack options. That's not a mindset issue. That's a structural issue. You have a choice. You can keep calling this being responsible, or you can see it clearly for what it is, dependence. And dependence always extracts a cost. It costs time. It costs dignity. It costs future leverage. You've seen this play out. People staying in jobs they hate. People accepting disrespect. People delaying growth. Why? Because walking away feels dangerous when there is no backup. That's the trap. Dependence doesn't just limit money. It limits behavior. It changes how you think. It changes how you speak. It changes what you tolerate. You tell yourself stories to survive it. It's not that bad. At least it pays the bills. I'll deal with it later. Later becomes years. That's the real danger. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Leverage is the ability to choose. To say yes without desperation. To say no without fear. And leverage only comes from independence. Not total independence. Enough independence. Enough to breathe. Enough to negotiate. Enough to walk away if needed. That's the key. You don't need their permission to build leverage. You don't need approval to reduce dependence. You don't need validation to protect your future. But dependence trains you to wait for permission. Permission to speak. Permission to leave. Permission to grow. And the longer you wait, the weaker your position becomes. This is why dependent people are nice. Not kind. Nice. They smile while resenting. They agree while suffocating. They nod while shrinking. That's not character. That's survival. And survival mode is expensive. When your income depends on one source, time stops being yours. You schedule life around work. You delay health. You postpone learning. You sacrifice growth. Not intentionally. Gradually. That's how dependence works. Slow erosion. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your employer doesn't need to threaten you. The structure already does. When there's no backup, silence becomes logical. Compliance becomes rational. Fear becomes normal. And you call it adulthood. But adulthood without leverage is just controlled existence. You have a choice. You can continue trading silence for security. Or you can start building leverage quietly, patiently, deliberately. It's not about rebellion. It's about preparation. It's not about confrontation. It's about options. That's the key. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop tolerating bad conditions because it's safer. Stop postponing your future because now isn't the right time. Stop confusing patience with paralysis. Patience builds. Paralysis waits. Here's what you must start doing. Start reclaiming leverage in small, boring ways. One skill that increases your value outside your job. One income stream that doesn't require your boss's approval. One asset that continues even when you stop showing up. You don't need to quit. You need to counterbalance. It's not about rebellion, it's about discipline. Discipline to build quietly. Discipline to invest time when you're tired. Discipline to choose long-term leverage over short-term comfort. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means not being trapped. It means choosing work, not clinging to it. It means staying because you want to, not because you're afraid. That changes everything. When you have leverage, conversations change. Negotiations change. Your posture changes. You're calmer. Clear. Less reactive. Because fear no longer controls the room. That's the power of leverage. And leverage doesn't come from confident speeches. It comes from structure. Security is structure. Leverage is structure. That's the key. People ask, how do I get more confidence at work? Wrong question. Confidence is a side effect of leverage. When you can leave, you speak differently. When you have options, you act differently. Not arrogant. Grounded. This is why the goal isn't freedom first. It's leverage first. Freedom comes later. You have a choice. You can keep defending a fragile position. Or you can start strengthening it. And the strengthening doesn't require permission. It requires consistency. 30 minutes a day building something that isn't tied to your job. Learning something transferable. Creating something that compounds. That's how dependence breaks. Not with dramatic exits. With quiet preparation. Dependence kills leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Let this chapter land. If losing your job would silence you today, dependence is already in control. If fear dictates your behavior, leverage is missing. And missing leverage is the real risk. You've now seen how dependence operates. How it limits speech. How it controls choices. Next, we shift from understanding the risk to building the defense. Because leverage doesn't appear by accident. It's designed. You've identified the trap. Now it's time to build protection. Chapter 4. Income diversity is not greed, it's defense. People remind themselves of a comforting lie. If I want more income, I'm being greedy. That lie keeps them fragile. Income diversity is not greed. It's defense. That's the key. You don't build extra income to get rich. You build it to survive. Say it again. You don't build extra income to get rich. You build it to survive. Most people associate multiple incomes with excess, with ego, with chasing more. They imagine yachts and bragging rights. But that's not what resilience looks like. Resilience looks boring, quiet, modest. It looks like rent getting paid when work slows down. It looks like groceries covered when hours get cut. It looks like calm when emergencies hit. That's defense. You have a choice. You can keep moralizing money. Or you can start protecting your life. Because life doesn't care about your intentions. It responds to structure. And structure is built through redundancy. One income leaves you exposed. Multiple incomes absorb shock. That's how systems survive. Think about emergencies. Car breaks down. Medical bill appears. Family needs help. With one income, these events create panic. With multiple incomes, they create inconvenience. That difference matters. It's not about greed, it's about discipline. Discipline to prepare for reality. Discipline to build before crisis arrives. You don't need their permission to protect yourself. You don't need approval to build a second stream. You don't need validation to reduce risk. That's the key. People misunderstand income diversity because they start at the wrong place. They ask, how much more can I make? Wrong question. The right question is, how much risk can I remove? Risk is removed through options. Options are created through multiple streams. Not massive streams. Reliable ones. A small freelance client. A simple online service. A part-time consulting role. A digital product. A rental arrangement. None of these need to replace your job. They need to back it up. Defense works quietly. Here's what happens when you have even one modest side income. You stop panicking over every email from your boss. You stop clinging to every shift. You stop calculating life to the dollar. Because one income no longer decides everything. That's freedom beginning. You don't build extra income to get rich. You build it to survive. Look at real people. Not influencers. The teacher who tutors 2 nights a week and never misses rent when school budgets tighten. The engineer who consults on weekends and shrugs when bonuses disappear. The nurse who sells a digital guide and stays calm during staffing cuts. None of them are flashy. All of them are resilient. They didn't escape work. They escaped fragility. That's defense. You have a choice. You can wait until your job fails you. Or you can quietly build insurance that pays you. Because income diversity is paid insurance. And unlike traditional insurance, it grows. This is where people hesitate. I don't have time. I'm too tired. I'll do it later. Later is expensive. Later is when stress forces bad decisions. Later is when desperation removes choice. Defense is built before impact. That's the key. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop thinking extra income must be massive to matter. Stop dismissing small streams as not worth it. Stop waiting for perfect ideas. Perfection delays protection. Here's what you must start doing. Start building income layers. One that uses your current skill. One that can scale slowly. One that is independent of your employer. 30 minutes a day is enough. Consistency beats intensity. It's not about inspiration. It's about discipline. Discipline to show up tired. Discipline to build quietly. Discipline to prioritize defense over comfort. Income diversity doesn't require burning out. It requires choosing boring progress. People chase freedom and skip resilience. That's backwards. Resilience comes first. Freedom follows. Because when you're not afraid of collapse, your decisions change. You invest better. You negotiate better. You live calmer. That's the psychological payoff. One income keeps your nervous system on edge. Multiple incomes calm it down. Not because you're rich. Because you're protected. You don't build extra income to get rich. You build it to survive. Survival is underrated. But survival is the foundation of everything else. Without survival, ambition collapses. Without defense, dreams become pressure. That's the truth. And defense doesn't require permission. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify it. You just build. Quietly. Consistently. Relentlessly. Most people wait for motivation. Resilient people rely on systems. That's the key. When income is diversified, emergencies lose their power. They become problems, not threats. That difference is everything. Because threats hijack your thinking. Problems invite solutions. And solutions are where growth happens. You have a choice. You can keep defending one income as enough, or you can start defending your future. And defending your future doesn't require greed. It requires foresight. Defense is wisdom. Defense is maturity. Defense is respect for reality. You don't build extra income to get rich. You build it to survive. Let this chapter land. If losing one income would still shake your life, defense is incomplete. If emergencies still create panic, defense is missing. You've now reframed the purpose of income diversity. It's not about excess. It's about resilience. Next, we move to the resource everyone ignores while chasing money. Because income is built with time. And how you use time determines everything. You've understood defense. Now let's talk about the real asset you're spending every day. Chapter 5. Time is your first asset, not money. Most people are waiting. Waiting for more money. Waiting for better conditions. Waiting for permission. That's the mistake. Money is not your first asset. Time is. That's the key. People say, if I had more money, I'd start. Wrong order. If you use your time correctly, money follows. If you waste your time, no amount of money saves you. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. Say it again. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. Every income you've ever seen was built with time before it produced money. Skills took time. Businesses took time. Assets took time. But people treat time like it's unlimited, and money like it's rare. That backward thinking keeps them stuck. You have a choice. You can keep spending time unconsciously, or you can start investing it deliberately. Because time spent without intention disappears. Time invested compounds. That's the difference. Look at how most evenings are used. Scrolling. Complaining. Recovering from the day. Weekends disappear the same way. Rest without direction. Entertainment without limits. Then Monday arrives. And the cycle repeats. That routine feels normal. But normal doesn't build leverage. Time discipline does. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. This chapter is where excuses collapse. I don't have money. That's not the problem. I don't have time. That's usually a lie. You have time. You just don't control it. And whatever you don't control controls you. That's the key. Time is the raw material of income. How you allocate it determines your future streams. One focused hour a day beats one intense weekend a month. Consistency beats bursts. This is where people overcomplicate. They think they need massive effort. They think they need motivation. They don't. They need structure. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline to decide in advance how time is used. Discipline to protect certain hours. Discipline to show up even when tired. That's how leverage is built. Think in blocks. One block for learning. One block for building. One block for refining. 30 minutes. 60 minutes. Not heroic. Sustainable. That's the key. People underestimate small, consistent use of evenings and weekends. They think it's too little to matter. But leverage doesn't come from volume. It comes from repetition. An hour a day is 7 hours a week. 7 hours a week is over 300 hours a year. 300 hours applied to one skill changes your income. That's math, not inspiration. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. Most people give their best hours to employers and leave scraps for themselves. That's backwards. You don't need to quit your job. You need to stop donating all your energy. Your future deserves prime time too. You don't need their permission to protect your evenings. You don't need approval to use weekends intentionally. You don't need validation to invest time in yourself. That's the key. Time discipline doesn't mean no rest. It means intentional rest. Rest that restores. Not rest that numbs. There's a difference. Numbing rest avoids discomfort. Restorative rest supports growth. Most people numb because growth feels hard. But discipline isn't punishment. It's alignment. You align time with goals. Not mood. You have a choice. You can let time leak, or you can channel it. Leaking time feels harmless, until years pass. That's the real cost. People look back and say, I don't know where the time went. It went where you sent it. That's uncomfortable. But it's empowering. Because if you control where time goes, you control what grows. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop waiting for money before acting. Stop treating evenings as leftovers. Stop thinking weekends are only for escape. Escape doesn't build freedom. Preparation does. Here's what you must start doing. Audit your time honestly. Where does it go after work? Where does it go on weekends? What gets priority? Then redesign. Choose one skill connected to income diversity. Block time for it. Protect that block like an appointment. No negotiation. No mood checks. That's discipline. It's not about talent, it's about consistency. Talented people quit. Consistent people compound. This is where leverage quietly forms. No applause. No instant results. Just steady progress. Most people quit here because results aren't visible yet. They want feedback too early. But structure comes before reward. That's the key. When time is disciplined, confidence increases. Because you know you're building. Even before money shows up, stability grows. Because your future is in motion. That changes how you feel at work. That changes how you respond to stress. You're no longer waiting to be saved. You're constructing an exit. And exits don't require panic. They require patience. Money follows structure. Structure follows time discipline. Let this sink in. If your time isn't controlled, your income never will be. If your hours are reactive, your finances will be too. This chapter isn't about doing more. It's about doing intentionally. One focused block a day. Every day. That's enough. You don't need permission to start. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need more money. You need to respect time as the asset it is. Because time once spent never returns. Money can. That's why time comes first. You've now shifted the order. From money first thinking to time first thinking. And that shift changes everything. Next, we're going to confront the enemy that quietly steals your time, energy, and future, while pretending to be harmless. You've learned how to use time. Now let's talk about what makes people give it away. Chapter 6. Comfort keeps you exposed. Comfort feels good. That's why it's dangerous. Comfort whispers, not today. Comfort says, you've earned rest. Comfort promises safety. But comfort doesn't protect you. Comfort delays you. That's the key. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. Say it again. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. Most people don't fail because they make bad decisions. They fail because they delay good ones. They stay comfortable. They keep the routine that pays the bills. They keep the schedule that feels manageable. They keep the life that doesn't challenge them. Until something breaks. And then comfort disappears. That's how exposure works. You have a choice. You can act while things feel okay. Or you can react when they fall apart. One builds protection. The other creates panic. Comfort delays action. Action builds protection. Look at the pattern. Someone stays in a job they don't like because it's comfortable. The pay is predictable. The effort is familiar. They tell themselves they'll build something later. Later becomes years. Then the company restructures. Hours get cut. The role disappears. Now decisions are rushed. Skills are outdated. Options are limited. Not because they were lazy, but because comfort postponed preparation. That's the cost. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. People don't panic when things are good. They panic when comfort is removed. And panic decisions are always bad decisions. Selling assets too early. Taking any job out of fear. Abandoning long-term plans for short-term relief. That's what exposure looks like. You don't need their permission to act before disruption. You don't need approval to prepare while things are stable. You don't need validation to build protection quietly. That's the key. Comfort convinces you that urgency is unnecessary. That's the trick. But urgency doesn't mean stress. Urgency means respect for reality. Reality changes. Markets shift. Companies fail. Health declines. Comfort ignores that. Action acknowledges it. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. Discipline to move when it's inconvenient. Discipline to build when there's no pressure. Discipline to sacrifice comfort for protection. That's how resilience is built. Here's another story. Someone relies on one income that covers everything. No savings pressure. No urgency. Weekends are for rest only. Evenings are for escape. Then a medical issue hits. Or a family emergency. Or inflation spikes. Suddenly the same income isn't enough. Now they scramble. They look for side work under stress. They accept bad terms. Not because they lack ability, but because comfort delayed action. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. This is why comfort is more dangerous than struggle. Struggle sharpens. Comfort dulls. Struggle forces learning. Comfort excuses delay. Struggle builds capacity. Comfort maintains exposure. You have a choice. You can stay comfortable and hope nothing changes. Or you can act while calm and stay in control. One path feels easier today. The other feels easier later. That's the trade-off. Most people choose today. Disciplined people choose later. That's the key. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop using comfort as a reason to wait. Stop saying, "I'm fine for now." Stop letting ease decide your future. Ease is not a strategy. Here's what you must start doing. Start acting while things are stable. Build skills when income is steady. Create side income when bills are covered. Save aggressively when stress is low. That's counterintuitive. That's why it works. People wait for pain to motivate them. But pain ruins judgment. Action taken early is calm. Action taken late is desperate. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. This chapter isn't telling you to suffer. It's telling you to be intentional. Intentional discomfort now prevents forced discomfort later. That's the math. 1 hour building when you're tired. 1 weekend learning instead of escaping. 1 habit that stretches you. These are small costs, but they buy protection. Protection from panic. Protection from desperation. Protection from collapse. That's the payoff. You don't need to destroy your comfort. You need to stop obeying it. Comfort should serve you, not command you. That's the shift. When comfort no longer controls your choices, your future opens up. You stop asking, "What feels easiest?" and start asking, "What builds protection?" That question changes everything. Comfort feels safe. Comfort is expensive. Let this settle. If your current comfort disappeared tomorrow, would you be ready? If routine broke, would you have options? Those answers reveal exposure. And exposure is optional. You have a choice. You can delay and hope. Or you can act and prepare. One keeps you calm today. The other keeps you safe tomorrow. Discipline chooses tomorrow. You've now seen the hidden cost of comfort. How it delays action. How it increases exposure. Next, we move to the real solution. What actually creates income streams that survive disruption? Comfort kept you still. Discipline moves you forward. Chapter 7, Side income is a skill problem, not a luck problem. Most people blame luck. They say, "I just don't get opportunities." They say, "Others got lucky." That's a comforting excuse. It's also false. Side income is not a luck problem. It's a skill problem. That's the key. Income streams don't come from opportunities. They come from abilities. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. Say it again. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. A job pays you for showing up. A skill pays you wherever it's needed. That difference matters. When you rely on a job, your income is tied to one place, one role, one decision maker. When you rely on skills, income follows you. Across companies, across markets, across downturns. Skills stack. Skills travel. Skills survive job loss. That's the reality. You have a choice. You can keep waiting for opportunities, or you can start becoming valuable. Because opportunities don't create income. Value does. That's the key. People who say side income is hard are usually saying something else. They're saying, I haven't built a marketable skill. And that's uncomfortable to admit. Because skills require effort, repetition, practice. Luck requires nothing. That's why people prefer the luck story. But here's the truth. Every side income you've ever seen traces back to a skill. Writing, design, sales, analysis, teaching, coding, editing, managing systems. None of these appeared magically. They were learned. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. This is why side income feels impossible to people who only identify as employees. They say, I don't know what to do. What they really mean is, I don't know what I can offer. That's a skill gap, not a luck gap. And skill gaps can be closed. You don't need their permission to learn. You don't need approval to practice. You don't need validation to improve. That's the key. Here's where people get stuck. They think skills must be extraordinary. They think they need talent. They don't. Markets don't reward brilliance first. They reward reliability. Being consistently useful beats being occasionally impressive. It's not about talent, it's about discipline. Discipline to practice daily. Discipline to be bad at first. Discipline to keep going when there's no reward yet. That's how skills form. And once skills form, income follows. Not instantly. Inevitably. This is why skills are powerful. A job can disappear. A skill doesn't. A company can downsize. A skill relocates. An industry can change. A skill adapts. That's leverage. Skills stack. Skills travel. Skills survive job loss. Think about people who bounce back quickly after disruption. They don't have better luck. They have transferable skills. They can solve problems. They can communicate. They can produce outcomes. And outcomes get paid. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. Here's what you must stop doing. Stop waiting for the right opportunity. Stop scrolling for shortcuts. Stop assuming side income requires insider access. That thinking keeps you passive. Here's what you must start doing. Start identifying skills with demand. What do businesses pay for repeatedly? What problems don't go away? What tasks do people outsource? Those answers point to skills. Then start small. Learn basics. Practice publicly or privately. Apply it in low-risk ways. You don't need to be the best. You need to be useful. That's the key. People fail here because they chase income instead of capability. They ask, how do I make money fast? Wrong question. The right question is, what skill can I build that pays for years? That question changes behavior. It shifts focus from shortcuts to systems. And systems compound. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. This chapter isn't telling you to quit your job. It's telling you to stop relying on it exclusively. Jobs are fine. Jobs are not leverage. Skills are leverage. Leverage gives you options. Options reduce fear. Reduced fear improves decisions. That's the chain. You have a choice. You can remain dependent on a role. Or you can become valuable beyond it. Becoming valuable takes time. Remaining dependent costs you more time. That's the trade. Here's the uncomfortable part. Skills don't build themselves. They demand focused effort when no one is watching. No applause. No immediate payoff. Just repetition. That's why most people quit early. But discipline doesn't quit. It's not about inspiration. It's about repetition. Repetition builds competence. Competence builds confidence. Confidence attracts income. That order matters. If you skip repetition, nothing follows. Skills stack. One skill supports another. Writing supports marketing. Marketing supports sales. Sales supports everything. This is how side income grows quietly. Not from luck. From layers. And once layered, income becomes resilient. That's the goal. Resilient income. Not flashy income. Jobs pay you once. Skills pay you repeatedly. Let this land. If your income disappears when your job disappears, you don't have skills. You have a position. Positions are temporary. Skills are portable. And portable value is power. You don't need permission to start building it. You don't need approval to learn after work. You don't need validation to practice. You just need consistency. You've now reframed side income completely. It's not about chasing money. It's about building capability. Next, we move into the emotional shift that happens when skills and income diversify, when fear begins to lose its grip. You've built value. Now let's talk about what that does to risk and control. Chapter 8. Risk shrinks when control grows. Most people misunderstand risk. They think risk is danger. They think risk is uncertainty. They think risk is volatility. That's not true. Risk is fragility. Risk is depending on one thing to keep your entire life standing. One paycheck. One client. One job. One system you don't control. That's risk. You don't reduce risk by hoping nothing goes wrong. You reduce risk by building options. That's the key. Control comes from having options. Not opinions. Not motivation. Not confidence. Options. When you have options, fear loses leverage. When you don't, fear controls everything. Look at how most people live. They say they're playing it safe. But they've tied their entire survival to a single income. That's not safety. That's exposure. If that income disappears, everything collapses. Rent, food, identity, self-worth. That's not freedom. That's a hostage situation. And your nervous system knows it. That's why so many people are anxious even when they're earning enough. Because deep down they know how fragile their setup is. One problem. One decision they didn't make. One company decision they didn't control. And it's over. You feel that pressure every day. You just learn to live with it. But you don't have to. You have a choice. Multiple incomes don't just change your bank account. They change your psychology. That's what people miss. They think building another income is about money. It's not. It's about removing panic. When survival depends on one stream, your brain is always in threat mode. Even if you pretend you're calm. You tolerate bad jobs, bad bosses, bad conditions. Because you don't have leverage. You don't negotiate when you're desperate. You comply. That's the key. Options create calm because survival is no longer fragile. When one income slows, another holds. When one disappears, life continues. No panic. No collapse. No scrambling. That's control. And control shrinks risk. Say it again. Control shrinks risk. Most people chase high returns instead of high resilience. That's backwards. It's not about making more money fast. It's about building a structure that doesn't break easily. That's the difference between gamblers and builders. Gamblers rely on outcomes. Builders rely on systems. You don't need their permission to build systems. You don't need to quit your job. You don't need a dramatic leap. You need layers. That's the discipline. Layer 1, your primary income. Layer 2, a secondary stream you control. Layer 3, something scalable even if small. None of them need to be huge. They need to be independent. Independence is what matters. If two incomes depend on the same boss, that's still one risk. If two incomes depend on the same platform, same problem. Real options are uncorrelated. That's the key. More options mean less fear. Say it. More options mean less fear. Fear doesn't disappear because you're brave. It disappears because you're prepared. People say, "I'm not afraid of losing my job." They should be. Not because they're weak, but because they're exposed. Confidence without backup is delusion. Real confidence comes from redundancy. If this fails, that holds. If that slows, this continues. Your life doesn't wobble. That's strength. And notice something important. When fear drops, decisions improve. You stop making short-term choices. You stop chasing validation. You stop accepting bad deals. Because you're not cornered. That's why people with options seem calmer. It's not personality. It's structure. You don't need their permission to build that structure. You don't need approval to start small. You don't need validation to protect yourself. It's not about hustle. It's about insulation. Most people exhaust themselves hustling one fragile stream. They pour all their energy into a single point of failure. Then they call it ambition. That's not ambition. That's concentration risk. It's not about effort. It's about design. You can work hard and still be fragile. You can work calmly and become resilient. That's the shift. Start asking better questions. Not, how do I make more here? But, what happens if this stops? If the answer scares you, the system is broken. That's the key. You don't fix fear with affirmations. You fix it with options. And options are built intentionally. You decide to allocate time. You decide to build slowly. You decide to tolerate boredom now for calm later. That's discipline. It's not about intelligence. It's about behavior. It's not about luck. It's about repetition. Small streams built consistently beat one giant fragile source. Every time. Say it again. More options mean less fear. More options mean less fear. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. If losing one income would destroy your life, you're not unlucky. You're understructured. That's not an insult. That's information. Information you can act on. You have a choice. You can keep hoping nothing goes wrong. Or you can design a life that survives when it does. Because something will go wrong. Markets shift. Companies fail. People change. Fragile systems break under pressure. Resilient systems adapt. That's the entire game. Risk shrinks when control grows. Control grows when options multiply. And options multiply only when you stop thinking short-term. This chapter isn't about fear. It's about preparation. It's about refusing to live one paycheck away from panic. It's about building calm on purpose. Because calm isn't a personality trait. It's a structural outcome. More options mean less fear. Remember that. You reduced risk by building control. Now it's time to understand what that control is really for. Because stability comes before freedom. Always. Chapter 9. The goal is stability first, not freedom. Most people aim at the wrong target. They say they want freedom. Financial freedom. Time freedom. Location freedom. But they skip the step that makes freedom possible. Stability. That's the mistake. Freedom without stability isn't freedom. It's anxiety with a different name. That's the key. When your income is unpredictable, your mind is unstable. When your expenses are uncertain, your decisions become emotional. You don't make long-term plans when you're panicking. You react. That's why chasing freedom too early backfires. People quit jobs without a base. They start businesses without buffers. They bet on themselves with no runway. And when pressure hits, they don't feel free. They feel trapped. You have a choice. You can chase the image of freedom. Or you can build the foundation that creates it. Stability comes first. Always. The first real win isn't more money. It's predictability. Replacing panic with predictability changes everything. When you know rent is covered, your shoulders drop. When bills are handled, your thoughts slow down. When survival is secured, your brain stops screaming. That calm isn't laziness. It's capacity. That's the key. Stable people think better. They don't rush. They don't grab. They don't settle. They choose. Unstable people don't choose. They cope. That's not a character flaw. It's a structural problem. It's not about courage. It's about containment. You don't need their permission to stabilize your life. You don't need applause for being responsible. You don't need validation for moving slower. Most people rush because they're afraid of being left behind. But speed without control leads to burnout. Stability buys time. Say it. Stability buys time. And time builds freedom. Time to test ideas. Time to learn skills. Time to recover from mistakes. Without time, everything feels urgent. Urgency kills strategy. That's why stable systems outperform intense effort. It's not about hustle. It's about sustainability. Here's what stability actually looks like. Not luxury. Not excess. Consistency. A baseline income you can rely on. Expenses that don't surprise you. Margins that absorb shocks. That's it. Boring. Unsexy. Powerful. Most people reject this phase because it doesn't feel impressive. They want freedom stories. They want escape narratives. But escape without stability creates another prison. That's the truth nobody markets. You don't build freedom by running away. You build it by staying long enough to stabilize. That's the discipline. It's not about ambition. It's about order. Order first. Expansion later. You have a choice. You can keep gambling on emotional freedom. Or you can lock in predictable stability. One gives you stress. The other gives you leverage. And leverage is freedom's currency. Here's the behavioral shift you need to make. Stop optimizing for excitement. Start optimizing for consistency. Stop asking, how fast can I leave? Start asking, how long can I sustain? That's the key. When your system can sustain, freedom becomes inevitable. When your system is fragile, freedom becomes fantasy. You don't need their permission to stay grounded. You don't need to explain why you're building slowly. You don't need to justify stability to people who live in chaos. Stability isn't playing small. It's playing long. And long-term always wins. Look at people who actually live free. They didn't leap. They layered. They secured one level then the next. They removed volatility before they removed structure. That's why their freedom looks calm. Not desperate. Stability removes the emotional tax from your life. Every unstable dollar costs you focus. Every unpredictable bill costs you energy. And energy is finite. That's why the first win is predictability. Predictable income. Predictable expenses. Predictable routines. Routine isn't boring. Routine is protective. It creates space. Space to think. Space to plan. Space to choose better. That space is where freedom grows. Say it again. Stability buys time. Time builds freedom. Most people invert this order. They chase freedom first and hope stability follows. It rarely does. Because pressure forces bad decisions. When you're unstable, you accept bad deals. You chase fast money. You abandon discipline. And every shortcut increases volatility. That's the cycle. You break it by choosing stability on purpose. Even when it feels slow. Even when it feels boring. That's the price of real freedom. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's quiet control. And control compounds. Once stability is locked in, everything accelerates. Your confidence becomes real. Your choices expand. Your tolerance for risk improves. Because risk no longer threatens survival. That's the moment freedom stops being an idea and becomes an outcome. You don't need their permission to build that outcome. You have a choice. Stability first. Freedom later. Always in that order. You've learned how control reduces risk. Now you understand why stability must come before freedom. Next we finish the framework. Because true strength isn't earning more. It's building a life that doesn't collapse when one piece is removed. Chapter 10. Build so losing one income changes nothing. Most people think financial strength means earning more. It doesn't. Real financial strength is silence. Silence when something breaks. Silence when income drops. Silence when one stream disappears. If one income disappears and your life doesn't change, you're strong. If one income disappears and you panic, the system failed. That's the test. That's the key. This chapter isn't about making more money. It's about becoming unbreakable. Most people are impressive on the surface. High income, busy schedules, constant motion. But underneath, Everything is fragile. One layoff, one lost client, one platform change, and the entire structure collapses. That's not bad luck. That's bad design. You have a choice. You can keep building impressive income, or you can build resilient systems. One looks good. The other survives. Hustle builds speed. Systems build stability. Speed without systems creates burnout. Systems without panic create control. That's the shift. True wealth is redundancy. One income is not security. It's exposure. Two incomes aren't security either if they depend on the same source. Same boss. Same platform. Same market. That's still one failure point. Real systems are layered. Independent streams. Different timelines. Different risk profiles. That's the key. When one fails, the others hold. That's not luck. That's engineering. Most people hustle harder when they feel fragile. They work more hours. They chase faster money. They accept worse deals. And every one of those decisions increases risk. It's not about effort. It's about structure. Say it. It's not about effort. It's about structure. You don't need their permission to build structure. You don't need approval to slow down. You don't need validation to stop overworking one fragile stream. You need discipline. Not motivational discipline. Architectural discipline. Designing your life so no single point of failure can destroy it. Here's the rule. If one income disappearing would force you to change your lifestyle, the system is incomplete. Not immoral. Not shameful. Incomplete. Information, not judgment. And information gives you power. You have a choice. You can ignore that signal, or you can build accordingly. Here's what building a real system looks like. First, you stop romanticizing hustle. Hustle is a phase, not a foundation. Hustle gets things started. Systems keep things alive. If you're still hustling the same way after years, you didn't build a system. You built a dependency. That's the key. Second, you separate survival from ambition. Your survival income must be boring, predictable, reliable. Your growth income can be creative, scalable, experimental. Most people mix these up. They gamble with survival, then wonder why they're stressed. It's not about courage. It's about containment. Third, you intentionally build overlap. For a period of time, you carry more than you need. More streams than necessary. More margin than comfortable. Not forever. Just long enough. Redundancy feels inefficient to fragile thinkers. Feels expensive. To builders it feels safe. And safety compounds. When your life doesn't depend on one income, you negotiate differently. You walk away faster. You say no more often. You stop tolerating nonsense. That's real power. Most people call that confidence. It's not. It's insulation. And insulation is built, not felt. You don't wake up one day protected. You design protection daily. Small systems. Simple streams. Boring consistency. That's the discipline. It's not about brilliance. It's about repetition. One income that pays bills. Another that covers savings. Another that grows slowly in the background. No hero moves. No dramatic exits. Just quiet construction. That's how unbreakable lives are built. Say the anchor. If one income disappears and you panic, the system failed. Say it again. If one income disappears and you panic, the system failed. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want this level of strength, because it requires patience. It requires delaying applause. It requires building without recognition. Systems are invisible until they save you. And by then nobody claps. They just wonder why you're calm. That calm is earned. You don't need their permission to earn it. You don't need to explain why you're building layers. You don't need to justify why you're not all in on one thing. All in is for gamblers. Builders diversify survival. That's the key. This chapter closes the loop of the entire book. You stop blaming income. You fix behavior. You learn discipline. You removed emotional spending. You built control. You prioritized stability. Now you finish with strength. Strength is not excess. Strength is resilience. A life that doesn't collapse when something goes wrong. Because something will go wrong. Markets shift. Jobs end. Trends die. Only systems endure. You have a choice. You can keep tying your life to one outcome. Or you can design a structure that absorbs shock. One creates anxiety. The other creates peace. And peace is the real dividend of wealth. If losing one income would still allow you to sleep at night, you built it right. If losing one income would change nothing, you won. That's real financial strength. Not loud. Not flashy. Unshakable. You didn't hustle harder. You built smarter. And that's the entire message of this book. Control beats chaos. Systems beat luck. Behavior beats income. Build so losing one income changes nothing. Because when nothing can break you, everything becomes possible. One income is not a plan. It's a vulnerability. If your life depends on one source, you don't have stability, you have exposure. And exposure always collects a price. This audiobook was not about fear. It was about clarity. You don't need 10 incomes. You need more than one. You need options. You need structure. You need control. Because the goal is not to work forever. The goal is to never be desperate. So here's the challenge. Start building your second income, not tomorrow, not when it's comfortable, but now. Use your time. Build a skill. Create a backup. Reduce dependence. Because the moment you are no longer afraid of losing one income, that's the moment you start gaining real power.